So, so we had until now the Euler-Walker's method, the least squares method, the modified covariance method and the Burke's method, all trying to solve some kind of optimization problem in terms of prediction errors. You have to keep that in mind, because when we go to MLE now, you will see again the same thing appearing. Everywhere you are minimizing some square prediction errors. The only difference between MLE and the rest of the methods that we discussed is MLE has additional terms in the objective function, and we will see that very quickly. So, it is best understood with an example. Although I say AR11 here, I have used an ARCS11. There is not much difference between AR1 and ARCS11. The reason why we call this ARCS is, you can see in addition to the autoregressive component, you have the effect of some external input. This is just to give you a flavor of what happens when you have exogenous inputs, but that does not affect in any way the course of our analysis. So, here you have the effect of the additional input. For now, you think of this input as a deterministic signal that does not actually play much of a role. The only thing this term does is it changes the mean of y, that is all. The rest of the story is the same. So, the first thing in solving, the goal is now to estimate A1, B1 and sigma square E. If you do not like B1, you can just ignore B1 in your mind. Now, the goal is to set up the likelihood function of the n observations of y that I have. Of course, I also know u, but it is okay, you can ignore the input part. As I said on several occasions earlier, setting up the likelihood of correlated observations is not easy, because unlike in the white noise case, the joint PDF cannot be factorized into product of marginal PDFs, but there is a way out. First, let us identify the source of randomness in y, that is Ek, and we have to be convinced now, or we have to determine what is the distribution of the individual observation. So, if Ek stems out of a Gaussian, anyway the inputs are only deterministic, they are not going to change the distribution, they are only going to cause a mean shift. It is y and E, the relation between them, that is going to determine. We know that y follows a Gaussian distribution because it is a linear process. So, that part is guaranteed. The next one I need to know is what is the variance of y and what is the mean of y. Okay, we will come to that soon. First, let us find out how to write the joint PDF of this n observations, and that is the only thing that needs to be understood. The rest of it is only computational part. As I said, once you set up the likelihood, you have very limited role, the computer takes over and optimizes things for you. So, what we need is the PDF of y0, y1 up to yn minus 1. So, this is what I need, f of y0 up to yn minus 1. Unfortunately, I cannot write this as a product of marginal PDFs, but there is a way out, and the idea is very straightforward. Suppose I take two observations, I was given two observations, then the joint PDF can be written as using the Bayesian rule, Bayes rule in this fashion. That is a very straightforward thing, right. There is, regardless of the process, I can do this. Suppose I am given 3 observations, sorry, if I am given 3 observations. So, y0, y1, y2, then I can apply this recursively, right. So, I can say the first step, it is the f of y0 times joint PDF of these two given y0, and then I can further factorize it, correct. So, let us do that. You say f of y0 times f of y1 and y2 given y0, right. So, which would be, let us write that here, given y0, which you can further factorize. So, this part you can further factorize, and what would be that? Y1? So, that would be f of y1 given y0. Sorry, let us write it. So, you ultimately you would have two factors. One is f of y1. So, if you were to factorize this further, it would be f of y1 given and y0 also, and f of y2 given y1 y0. Okay. But normally we assume that this is a causal process, we will not worry about given y2 and so on, but even if it is given, now we will come to the AR part of it. Okay. So, eventually you will be able to write this as f of y0, f of y1 given y0, f of y2 given y1 and so on, under some conditions, and we will come to that shortly. Why are we doing this? First, if we understand that, then we will understand how to factorize this. Why am I writing it this way? Look at the process. The process that we have assumed is yk is very straightforward. Ignore input for now. So, just write here minus a1 yk minus 1 plus ek. You can always factor in the input later on. So, when I look at y1 given y0, what would be on the right hand side? Minus a1 y0 plus e1 given y0. Okay, just writing whatever is there. Now, E1 given y0 anyway you can't do anything, it is just E1, whether you give y0 or not, E1 is E1. So, we will omit that because there is nothing in y0 to predict E1, we will just retain this as E1. I am interested in the PDF of this variable. This is a random variable. Why is this a random variable? This is no longer random because this is fixed. Only this is causing randomness to y1 given y0. That is the big difference between conditioned y1 and unconditioned y1. Unconditioned y1 would be this. So, here this is fixed, whereas here in unconditional one, y0 is also a random variable. The difference between the conditional y1 and unconditional y1 is that in the conditional y1, conditioned y1 on y0, this is fixed. In other words, this only contributes to a mean of the conditioned y1, it does not contribute the randomness. So, if I were to ask you the variance of this conditioned one, so if I ask you what is the variance of conditioned y1, what would be your answer? That would be simply sigma square E, because this is only causing a mean shift. On the other hand, what is the variance of the unconditional y1? Because it is stationary, sigma square E over 1 minus a1 square. So, there is a big difference between conditional variance and unconditional variance. Which is higher? Does it make sense? Unconditional being higher, does it make sense? Is it reasonable? That is because you have y0 is being given to you, that is information given to you, that information has reduced the uncertainty. If I do not tell you anything, what is that is unconditional variance. If I do not give you the past at all, the variability is a measure of uncertainty. The uncertainty in y1 in some sense sigma square E by 1 minus a1 square. But if we give you a past observation, the uncertainty in y1 should come down. That means there is predictability. If it does not come down, if it remains the same, then there is no predictability. Okay. So, that is the reason why, in fact, now that is one of the reasons why we are looking at this. But the other reason is, suppose I move on and I look at y2, let us say given y1 and y0. suppose I consider the next instance, but now I am given 2 past observations. Would the story be the same? For this process, if I give you, suppose a process, I am assuming the process is AR1, right, that is a model telling you, the story would be the same. Y2 given Y1 Y0, what would be the expression? Minus A1 Y1 plus E2 given Y1 Y0, but we do not write that. So, what is happening here? If you look at the equation, I do not need to actually write Y0, I can omit this, because in the right hand side anyway Y0 does not play any role. That means, it as far as Y2 is concerned, it is sufficient to know only Y1. Why? Because I am assuming it is AR1. If it is AR2, I would require both. As far as that is the definition of an autoregressive process. An autoregressive process of order 1 means that in order to make a prediction of Yk, I only need Yk minus 1. I do not need the knowledge of Y at any other times. If it is AR2, I only need 2 observations in the past to make a prediction. And now you can extend that idea to ARP, which means that Y2 in this case, in this example, because it is AR1, is only condition, that is, it only depends on Y1, it does not depend on Y0. It is independent of Y0, you can say. If you are given Y1, then it does not matter what Y0 is, it is already embedded in Y1. And now this chain continues. That is one point. The key point is, if I were to ask you what is the covariance between conditioned Y2 and conditioned Y1, not unconditional ones, what would be your answer? The correlation or covariance between conditioned Y2, this conditioned Y2 and this conditioned Y1, do not look at this one here. Remember, the moment a condition, this becomes fixed. The only randomness in this condition 1 is E1. The only randomness in this one is E2, due to E2. So, how are the random sources in these two correlated? Uncorrelated. Whereas the unconditional ones, are Y2 and Y1 correlated? Yes, but the conditional ones are not correlated. In other words, you are just breaking the correlation between Y2 and Y1. Why are we doing this? Now you connect both these ideas. Here we have written the joint PDF as the product of f of Y0 and f of a conditioned Y1. Now if I extend this idea, I can write this part as f of Y1 given Y0 times f of Y2 given Y1. And so on. Now I apply this chain rule. So that is the beauty. We have said I cannot write the PDF of the original series, but if I freeze, why not? If imagine that this was not there, suppose Y0 was fixed, the remaining series conditioned on Y0 is uncorrelated. Now you come back to the fact that no, Y0 is not a deterministic quantity, it is a random variable, and that is why you factor in f of Y0. This is the prime difference intuitively between the least squares approach and the MLE. In least squares, what do we do? To set up our prediction errors, we throw away the initial observations. We say, everything is centered around Y0. You keep Y0 fixed and then you construct your prediction errors from 1 onwards. If it is ARP, then you freeze your first P observations and start setting up your equations from P plus 1 onwards. MLE, it says, no, every observation is important, and I will take into account, more importantly, I will take into account the randomness in the P observations, and that is what MLE is doing. That is the prime difference between MLE and least squares. In least squares, the initial observation, everything is conditioned on the initial P observations, and you do not take into account the randomness in the first P observations, whereas in MLE you are taking into account those. That is the only difference. That is why when you, so there is only 2 steps left, and then we are kind of done. So the only thing now that remains to be done, having observed the fact that the joint PDF now can be written as f of y0 times f of y1 given y0 and so on, which means now I can write a product here, f of yk given yk minus 1, where k runs from 1 to n minus 1. So this is my joint PDF. Here. So look how beautifully we have converted the problem in such a way that I can now still write the series as uncorrelated, but now in terms of conditional series. That is the beauty. So we have converted the original series into a new series where I fix the first P observations and write the conditional one. What you should observe is actually what we are doing is when you condition y1 on y0, what actually is remaining is only the errors, if your model is correct. Assume right now that model is correct. So the moment I condition, the only thing that is remaining is the error, but with a mean shift. That is okay. That mean shift we can estimate. So what you are doing is, instead of working with series y0, y1, yn minus 1, what you are working with is y0 epsilon 1 prediction error at 1 up to n minus 1. You are intuitively, implicitly you are rewriting the series in terms of prediction errors plus a y0. So now what do I need? I need 2 things. I need the unconditional PDF of y0 and I need the conditional PDF of yk. That is what we are doing here. The unconditional PDF, in order to construct the unconditional PDF, I know it is Gaussian because the process is linear. I know the mean is 0 and I know the variance is this. For the conditional PDF, what is the distribution of the conditional one? What is the distribution of y1 given y0? It's Gaussian. The only difference is mean is not 0. What is the mean? Minus a1 y0. So in general the mean is going to be minus a1 yk minus 1. Ignore the input part, do not worry about that. And what about the variance? We have already said variance is sigma square e. So f of y0 is this here, and the conditional PDF is this. That is all. So the only difference between these two is the mean and the variance. In this case there is no mean, but the variance and the variance is sigma square e or 1 minus a1 square. For the conditional case, the mean is given here minus a1 yk minus 1. When I say mean is minus a1 y0 or minus a1 yk minus 1, what is it? It is nothing but your prediction, right? It is expectation of yk given yk minus 1. What is it? It is nothing but, when I write here minus a1 yk minus 1, ignoring the input for now, setting the input to 0. What is this? This is a one step ahead prediction. That is a conditional PDF. So in other words, when I write here yk minus y hat of k, what is yk minus y hat of k given k minus 1? It is a prediction error. So naturally the prediction error is coming in. That is the comment that I made earlier. We said least squares, modified covariance, Berg's method, Euler-Walker, all of them are optimizing the sum square prediction errors. MLE is also doing that, except that you have some additional terms, and that is the only thing we need to observe. So here is your log likelihood. Look at the last here, the last term. Once again you have the least square subjective function coming there, which is not a surprise. We know least squares is contained in MLE whenever you have a Gaussian errors. So, apart from this you have two other terms. Apart from this you have two other terms, correct? What about, what is this, where is this term coming from? Why is this term present? So uncertainty in y0. MLE is taking into account the fact that, boss, your first observation is also uncertain. Least squares like methods, they completely freeze. They say everything is conditioned on those initial observations. So if your initial observations have gone for a toss, then your least squares method can actually give you poor results, whereas MLE will take care of that. Okay. The other way of looking at it is, if you were to ignore this additional term, let us ignore the ln sigma square e. If you just look at these two terms, something beautiful emerges as well, which is that, remember we said that this is the series that actually we are considering, although this is what we begin with, eventually we are working with this series. Suppose I were to estimate, I were to take into account y0. In the least squares I do not take into account this, because I fix this. I say there is nothing uncertain about it, I am pretty sure y0 is y0, that is what is least squares method. MLE says no, y0 is random, there is some uncertainty in it, you have to even take into account that. Suppose now I strike a middle ground. On one hand you have least squares freezing y0, on the other hand you have MLE taking into account the PDF of y0. I strike a middle ground, I say do not worry about the PDF of y0, I will still take into account the randomness in y0. Assume that this is some epsilon 0, and epsilon 0 is nothing but y0. That means my initial prediction is 0. I do not know anything to make an initial prediction. So, I am going to assume that this y0 that I have is nothing but the prediction error at lag 0. Now, I have given you the complete set of prediction errors, and now you can set up the least squares, but before you set up the least squares you have to understand that epsilon 0 alone has a different level of error in it, uncertainty in it compared to the rest of it. Why? Because epsilon 1, epsilon 2 up to epsilon n minus 1, those prediction errors have taken into account the past, whereas when it comes to epsilon 0 there is nothing in the past. So, the error in epsilon 0 is quite high compared to the error in, that means error in your predictions at 0 are quite high as compared to the predictions from 1 onwards. We are talking of AR1, the same arguments hold for ARP, which in other words the variance of epsilon 0, what is variance of epsilon 0? Sigma square e by 1 minus a1 square, whereas the variance of the remaining prediction errors sigma square e. So, if I were to set up a least squares problem, I should set up a weighted least squares problem. And what would be the optimal weighting? Inverse of the respective variability, correct? That is exactly the sum of these two terms. So, you have, why? Because if I were to set up the weighted least squares, what is optimal weighting? Inverse of the variance of the respective observation errors, prediction errors. Epsilon 0, which is same as y0, has a variance of sigma square e by 1 minus a1 square. So, the weighting will be the inverse of it. So, if I were to set up the weighted least squares problem, I would say k running from 0 to n minus 1. Wk would be, W naught would be 1 over sigma square e by 1 minus a1 square. For the remainder of observations, Wk would be 1 over sigma square e. That is what exactly these two observations are. So, therefore, in a full MLE you always have, you can see this, you can start with LS where you ignore these two terms, these three terms in fact, these three terms if you ignore it is LS. If you were to take into account, that is called the conditional least squares objective function. That means if you were to only look at, if you were to ignore all of this and only look at this, you would be solving what is known as a conditional least squares. Then you have unconditional least squares, which is I am not conditioning on any pre-observations y0, that is it, and then you have the full MLE. So, you have 3 flavors. So, those are your 2 objective functions, the conditional sum squares and unconditional sum squares. Normally, the full MLE can be quite difficult to solve. This is a very simple problem AR1, but in general, even if you were to set up MLE for ARMA and so on, you can show that there is a conditional sum squares, there is an unconditional sum squares part of MLE, and there is a full MLE. Sometimes the algorithms would like to solve the conditional sum squares. In ARIMA, if you look at ARIMA, there is something called CSS. Okay? There is an option in ARIMA which reads CSS, that CSS stands for conditional sum squares. That means, although ARIMA is solving an MLE problem for you, the ARIMA routine in R, it is solving an MLE problem for you. What it is actually doing is, by default, if you do not say anything, it will solve a lighter problem. This is a lighter problem. Minimizing CSS is a lighter problem. You say, no, 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 I want a slightly more rigorous problem to be solved, then it solves unconditional sum squares. If you want to solve the full MLE also, it is possible. But when n is large, truly speaking, after all the hue and cry that we are making about how great MLE is than least squares, when n is large, strictly you will not find so much of a difference between solving the conditional sum squares, which is nothing but your least squares, and unconditional sum squares, which is midway between your least squares and MLE or the full MLE. When n is small, it can make a difference. So, the result that comes about when you look at even AR models or ARMA models. So, I will go straight away, and these are just numerical examples. If you look at ARMA models, the result says whether you take unconditional least squares or the conditional least squares or the full MLE, all of them asymptotically result in Gaussian distribution and they result in consistent estimators. Although this result is for ARMA, it incorporates AR as well. The only difference when it comes to MA and AR is, for AR models you can use any of the least squares, Burke's method and so on. That is why there are separate routines written for AR. Okay. Where the moment you have MA, the least squares methods now they take form of nonlinear least squares, where you need initial guesses. Those initial guesses are generated by different algorithms, either Euler-Walker's method or there is something called a Hannan-Rissanen algorithm and so on. They are the ones that will actually seed the either the MLE or the nonlinear least squares. But in all of this, essentially you will, if n is large, you will end up with the same kind of distribution and you will asymptotically, you will also have a consistent estimate. There is no issue. The idea behind going through this theory is to tell you what is the fundamental difference between a maximum likelihood approach and a least squares approach and a weighted least squares approach and so on. So that you know when you are using an estimator what is the underlying philosophy and what impact it can have on the estimates. So, this kind of concludes. I did not discuss the how to seed the initialization of this ARMA of the estimators for ARMA models. As I said, when it comes to MA or ARMA models, you need to solve nonlinear least squares problems where you need to seed initial guesses. That is a tiny part, you do not have to worry about it so much. As far as the estimation of time series models is concerned, we have more or less discussed everything.